When Anthony Davila first got a mistrial, I was wondering, what did his defense attorney, Mark Germain, do to get jurors to believe that second-degree murder was the proper charge? Well, he used two simple concepts, the depraved mind and any act imminently dangerous to another. What does that mean? Let's take a quick look at that and where it's at in the law. To better understand the law, there are three terms we need to know and what they are. What is a concept, what is a principle, and what is a condition? A concept, also known as a legal construct, is an abstract idea, singularly, that is given legal meaning and significance. A legal principle is a fundamental rule or doctrine that serves as the foundation for a specific law. A condition is a requirement or limitation. All three words are incredibly important in understanding Florida's murder law. From concept, which is the idea, to a condition that limits the concept, to the principle, which is the grouping of concepts, all forming a law. Let's dissect Florida's second-degree murder law and using those three terms and where they're at specifically. How did Davila's defense attorney use and abuse those words? First, what are the two concepts? Right there, it says, when perpetrated by any act imminently dangerous to another. That's one concept. And then also the other one is evincing a depraved mind regardless of human life. Both of those are concepts. In Florida's second-degree murder law, there are many principles, but one of the principles that we're looking at is everything in number 2, which includes both of the concepts or legal constructs. Remember I said a condition is a limitation or a requirement? Well, you see what's highlighted in red is the word and. And conjoins both concepts. In other words, both concepts must be performed to satisfy the equation for a second-degree murder charge. And that's very, very specific and important. And this is where Germain baffled the jurors with BS and muddied the waters. Germain first started with the any act imminently dangerous to another. Under Florida law, let's see how it's defined. It refers to the actions that create a substantial and foreseeable risk of harm to another individual. Regarding homicide charge, this concept is often used to describe conduct that falls short of premeditated murder, but still demonstrates a culpability and disregard for human life. In legal terms, an act is considered imminently dangerous to another if it poses an immediate threat of harm to another person. This could include such as brandishing a weapon in a threatening manner, engaging in a physical altercation with someone while aware of the potential for serious injury or death, or engaging in a conduct that creates a high risk of harm to others, such as reckless driving. Imminently is what is relevant in this case. Another term, transferability, comes into play, and everybody seems to forget that. And what does that mean? Well, technically it's called transferred intent. And transferred intent is written into Florida's first-degree felony murder law. Section 2 enumerates that if you commit one of those violent felonies and somebody is killed during the commission of one of those, ergo, you are guilty of first-degree murder. This transfers any of the concepts of the home invasion robbery to the murder, including premeditation and intent. This would cancel the defense's use of any act imminently dangerous to another. It wasn't immediate. This was a pre-planned home invasion robbery. Remember those two concepts right there? And it's separated by the and. Remember the word condition, what it is? It's a requirement. The and statement requires both to happen and not just one. By only satisfying one of these concepts is a failure to meet the requirements for second-degree murder. Germain's defense for Davila was to remove the transferred intent of the home invasion robbery to the murder that's allowed under Florida law. And jurors bought it despite it not being really following the letter of the law. So imminently dangerous isn't really going to work for the defense. Let's look at the second part, and that's evincing a depraved mind. What is a depraved mind? A depraved mind has different characteristics that understood in the context of criminal law. It's recklessness, and that is the individual acts with a conscious indifference to the potential harm they may cause others. There's callousness, and that is they may display a cold, uncaring attitude towards the suffering or potential consequences of their actions. There's the indifference to risk, and that's where they may engage in a conduct that poses significant danger to others without considering the potential harm that could result. Wantonness. The individual may act without a regard for the foreseeable consequences of their actions. There's the high degree of culpability. It suggests that their actions were not merely negligent or accidental, but rather intentional or grossly reckless. There's also extreme conduct, and it may involve acts of violence, endangerment, or other conducts that pose a significant risk of harm to others. There's the awareness to the consequences. And, despite this awareness, they proceed with their conduct without the regard for the potential harm it may cause. And let me tell you, is that all of these characteristics collectively demonstrate a mindset that is indifferent to the value of human life and the safety of others, or more commonly known as the depraved mind. So let's take a look and see where they fail. The lack of recklessness is a key factor that prevents the defense of the perpetrators using the concept of a depraved mind for their action. Here's why the lack of recklessness is crucial. Well, it was calculated and deliberate actions. The perpetrators in this, they engaged in a meticulously planned home invasion and robbery over a period of 3 months. They took deliberate steps to prepare for the crime, including obtaining firearms, tactical gear, and planning the logistics of the robbery. Their actions were not impulsive or reckless, but rather calculated and deliberate. This calculated approach does not align with the reckless disregard for human life typically associated with the depraved mind. Then there was the preparation and planning. The extensive preparation and planning undertaken by the perpetrators demonstrates a level of forethought and intentionality that it contradicts the notion of acting with a depraved mind. They were not acting in a haphazard or careless manner, but rather executing a carefully thought out plan to commit the crime. This level of planning suggests a specific intent to carry out the criminal act rather than a reckless indifference to the potential consequences. And there's the foreseeability of consequences. While the perpetrators were aware of the potential consequences of their actions, including risk of injury or death, their actions were not driven by a reckless indifference to human life. Instead, they consciously chose to engage in criminal conduct with full knowledge of the potential harm it could cause. The foreseeability of consequences alone does not establish the reckless disregard necessary to support a defense based on the depraved mind. Then there's the absence of impulsivity. The perpetrator's actions were not impulsive or spontaneous, but rather a result of a carefully planned action. They did not act on a sudden whim or without consideration for the potential outcome. This lack of impulsivity further undermines any argument that their actions were driven by a depraved mind. To summarize, the lack of recklessness is a key takeaway that prevents the defense of the perpetrators using the concept of a depraved mind. Their calculated and deliberate actions, extensive preparation and planning, foreseeability of consequences, and the absence of impulsivity all indicate a specific intent to commit the crime rather than a reckless disregard for human life. Therefore, the defense of a depraved mind would not be applicable in the case of Matthew Nicol's murder. How did his defense attorney use the depraved mind? Well, I found that out from the second email from the juror that has been contacting me. Remember those 7 characteristics of a depraved mind? Well, Davila's defense attorney did not cite one reason of those as being the reason for a depraved mind, only that he was upset that everybody was pressuring him. And this fractured the jury pool. Perhaps if the prosecution explained Florida law, sort of dumbed it down, it might have come out different. Some of the jurors bought the depraved mind lie, despite hearing from Tyler Graffing. And if you remember, Tyler Graffing gave up 116 pages to investigators and prosecutors to help seal the deal on nailing all these guys, including testifying in open court. But then there was also David Foreman-Taylor, who has now gone to prison over this matter, and he's testified in open court too. And both of them clearly have said that Anthony Davila was the mastermind who planned everything. He's the one that got everybody together. He wasn't pressured by anyone. He was the one making the checklist, and Tyler's statement is littered with the evidence of Tony being in charge of being the mastermind. He wasn't pressured by anyone. Let's look at a couple of examples in that testimony. Page 12, Tyler gives up that it was none other than Tony and Chase were in charge. On page 20, we get where and who. Highlighted in green, they were planning this since December. And who was doing it? Well, it's going to originally be 4 people, and Tony is the first person that Tyler names. This was a travesty of justice with Germain selling Anthony Davila had a depraved mind. He had no depraved mind at all. From his co-conspirators' testimony in open court and information given to prosecutors and investigators, we know that Anthony Davila was the mastermind. He got Tyler Graphing to go over there and draw a map of Matthew Nicol's house when Tyler befriended Matthew. We also know he followed him on Snapchat. So the depraved mind is an absolute frickin' joke. So how the hell did Germain pull it off? The blueprint Mark Germain used for Anthony Davila's defense is pretty clear. He removed 2 key principles and sold that to some of the jurors. Principle number 1 is transferability or transferred intent. He acted like it didn't exist. The second principle he removed was the 2 concepts combined making it up. Remember that? That was any act imminently dangerous to another and evincing a depraved mind regardless of human life. The whole depraved mind thing could be shut down real simple using phone records. Let's look at how Interpol cracked a large drug smuggling ring, and they used a circle like this with each spot on the outside to represent a person in this drug smuggling ring, and they wanted to find out who was the mastermind and who was the financier of it all. Well, they did exactly this. When a phone call came in, they drew a line from one person to the other, whoever that phone call was, and it kept on building this picture of who is making phone calls to one another. And you know, it built a big picture. Eventually, it got larger and larger, and you could see how many phone calls were placed and from who. This is indicative of who is the mastermind or who is calling the shots, and that's what they're looking for till eventually they were able to solve it. I don't know why they don't use this. This is a good visual representation and easy for any juror to understand and see who is calling the shots and who is the mastermind. This would show everybody's involvement and at what level, including Tony being the mastermind. Instead of the defense claiming he had a depraved mind because he was under pressure from everybody. What a joke. In closing, I'd like to include this list of stuff that I wish the prosecution would bring up to the jurors during the trial for Anthony Davila's next trial. And let's take a quick look at them. The first one is the past history of his criminal activity. It's called the Williams Rule. I already know that they are. I just wanted to make sure that's there. Good job, prosecution. Number 2 would be a simple understanding of both first-degree and second-degree murder laws in the state of Florida. Sort of dumb it down. Number 3 would be explain transferability regarding premeditation and intent in Florida's first-degree murder law. Explain why both concepts, any act imminently dangerous and evincing a depraved mind, must be present for a second-degree murder charge, not just one or the other. And also to be emphatic about that. If it's not, they don't have both of those concepts, then you must be emphatic about pushing for a first-degree murder charge because that is the correct charge. And also I'd suggest is maybe include that circle chart, you know, what I said that Interpol had used to crack a big drug smuggling operation. Well, include that because it's a good visual representation that shows, you know, who ever made the most calls to everybody, because that's probably the person that was either planning it or in charge or both. Anyway, these are just suggestions, and I hope the prosecution nails them. And he gets sentenced to life in prison with no chance for parole. Also, if you have any information pertaining to this case, please let me know. Thank you for watching.